Hey guys, good morning, or I know for Colorado people it's good morning, good afternoon for everybody else. I wanted to come here live because today is the big day for the huge, our cocktail party is tonight where Product X is going to be released. We're super excited. We're heading to the pool right now, and then we have a massage today paid for by Lavelle. Today at 3:30. So Chris and I are super excited. So we're gonna get a massage after we lay by the pool for a little bit and maybe go to the beach again. And then we're going to go to the cocktail party. And we will be live there tonight.
Unlock the darkest stories and unravel the mysteries with Dark Crime Box. Subscribe now and step inside the world of true crime like never before.
In 2017, a woman typed 2 names into Google. Not out of boredom. Not just curiosity, a married man and his pregnant wife. 1 year later, his entire family would be gone. This isn't rumor. It's not internet gossip. It's digital proof, a quiet search that existed long before anyone could imagine what would follow. Because sometimes the future doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it leaves a trail. Tonight, we are not starting this story with blood, police lights, or prison bars. We are starting it with a screen, cursor, and a question typed into a search engine that would later feel like a warning no one noticed in time. Before the world knew his name, before investigators ever showed up at the door, Chris Watts looked like the kind of man people trusted. He had a job, a wife who loved him, 2 little daughters who adored him, and another baby already on the way. From the outside, his life looked clean, normal, safe. But behind the smile, something was drifting out of place. Around this same time in 2017, a woman named Nichol Kessinger entered the company where Chris worked. She was new, young, confident, and within weeks her path crossed his. What no one knew back then was that while Chris went home each night to his family, another life was quietly opening somewhere else. Because behind closed doors and away from work, Nichol was not just meeting a coworker. She was researching him. She searched his name. Then, she searched his wife's name. Before anyone had died. Before there was any crime. Before police reports existed. Before the public knew anything at all. That is the part that doesn't sit right. Because people don't usually search a man's wife unless something already feels serious, or dangerous, or real. And if it was already real in 2017, then that means the ending did not begin in 2018. It began earlier, much earlier. As Chris's life slowly split into 2, something inside him began to fracture as well. At home, Shanann was planning for the future, decorating the nursery, posting photos, preparing for the baby she believed would bring her family closer. At the same time, Chris was building a secret life that promised him something else. Freedom. Not just from responsibility, but from consequence. By 2018, his marriage was unraveling in silence. Chris grew cold, distant, unfamiliar. Conversations turned empty. His body stayed, but his mind had already left. And somewhere behind the scenes, Nichol was no longer just interested. She was emotionally invested. But what happened between interest and murder? That's the part nobody wants to confront. Because affairs don't usually end in funerals. And love doesn't usually destroy children. Yet here, it did. So what changed? Investigators would later reveal that during this time, Chris began to speak differently. Think differently. Desire something that could not exist without someone else disappearing. And this is where part 1 becomes something darker. Because before a crime ever happens in the real world, it usually happens first in the mind. By the time Shanann returned from her final trip, something inside Chris was already gone. The man who kissed his children goodnight had vanished in thought long before he vanished in action. And the woman who Googled his family had been watching the story from the very beginning. What did she know? What did she expect? And why search his wife at all? Unless she believed one day she would not be there? Part 1 ends here. Not with death, but with a door already open, and a man already halfway through it. Because by the time the world would pay attention, It would be too late to stop what had already started. By the time the world would learn Chris Watts' name, everything had already been done. There would be no warning, no sirens, no chance to change what was coming. Because while everyone else slept, a family's future was quietly being erased inside a quiet house in Colorado. Hours earlier, Shanann arrived home late at night from a business trip, exhausted, pregnant, carrying new life inside her body. She walked through the front door believing she was returning to her husband. She was not. Inside that house stood a man who had already left her in his mind. There would be no struggle that neighbors would hear, no crash that would draw attention, no scream that would survive the walls. What happened in those final moments will never fully be known. All that would remain would be silence. By morning, 2 little girls would no longer wake up in their beds. Pregnant mother would not answer her phone, and a husband would pretend nothing had changed. Chris went to work that day like everything was normal. Let that sink in. He loaded tools, answered calls, drove to the job site, while his family lay lifeless behind him. Every movement he made that morning was not panic. It was planning. Investigators would later describe this as the calm after a storm, if you ignore the fact that hurricane Chris himself had made. When Shanann failed to answer calls, her friend grew uneasy. She went to the house, knocked, looked through windows. Something was wrong. Police arrived before Chris even realized the story had slipped out of his control. And there he stood in front of cameras, smiling, nervous, but not grieving, begging for his family to return, while already knowing they never would. This was the moment the world stopped believing him. When reporters saw not a broken man, but a hollow one. Inside the home, nothing looked disturbed. No signs of struggle. No blood. No shattered picture frames. Just too clean. Chris told the first lie quickly. Then another. Then another. At first, he claimed Shanann and had taken the children and disappeared. Then the story changed. Then changed again. When investigators pressed harder, his body language told a story his mouth never could. He did not cry. He did not collapse. He did not plead for help finding his wife. Instead, he folded in on himself slowly, until finally, the lie broke. Chris would eventually confess. And when the truth came out, it did not free him. It destroyed whatever image of him still existed. He admitted to killing his pregnant wife. He admitted to killing his daughters. He admitted that the monster the world feared was the man in the mirror. And then came the final question. Why? Some would say he wanted freedom. Some would say he was under emotional control. Some would say he was empty long before he killed. But one fact cannot be brushed aside. There was another woman. And she had been searching long before anyone else suspected anything. Investigators would question Nichol, her phone records, her messages, her searches. But the answers would never fully satisfy the public. Because people don't Google a family unless that family already matters. And love does not usually begin with curiosity about someone else's wife. So was she innocent? Or simply early? Chris went to prison. Not as a husband. Not as a father. But as a name attached forever to one of the most chilling family crimes in modern history. And Nichol Kessinger would never speak publicly again. No interviews, no explanations, no answers, just a trail of digital footprints that pointed to a story no one could undo. Part 2 does not end with closure. It ends with emptiness. A home with no laughter, a future without birthdays, a man with no freedom, and a woman who disappeared from the public's eye, but not from the timeline. Because the truth about this case is not only what happened, it is when it was already happening, before anyone noticed, before anyone asked the right questions, and before Google ever forgot. Chris Watts did not walk into prison as a man looking for forgiveness. He walked in as a man who had already lost his soul. No court drama, no long trial, no battle to prove innocence, just a guilty plea, and a life sentence that will never run out. Inside his cell, the world became smaller than the one he destroyed. The same walls, the same bars, the same routine that plays out every single day while the faces of his family never leave his mind. People think prison is loud. But the worst punishment is not the noise. It is the quiet. It is knowing that the children who once ran into your arms will never grow up, never speak again, never forgive you. Interviews from behind bars painted a man who did not fully understand himself. Chris spoke slowly, carefully, as if language could still save him. But no sentence was strong enough to undo what he had done. He would talk about regret, about nightmares, about God, about wishing he could go back. But the truth is, there is no back. Only forward into a future that will always be empty. Outside the prison, the world moved on without him. And so did the woman who once Googled his life before it collapsed. Nichol Kessinger vanished from public view. No documentaries. No interviews. No press statements. No closure. Just a disappearance from the world she once stepped into and quietly stepped back out of. And no matter how many questions remain, one thing is certain. Love did not start this story. Desire did. And desire does not care who gets broken. It only cares about being fed. What makes this case so disturbing is not only what happened, but how early it began. Long before August 2018. Long before news cameras. Long before police sirens. There were searches, curiosity, emotional crossing of lines. The ending was violent, but the beginning was subtle. And that is the lesson people struggle to accept. Most tragedies do not start with screams. They start with silence. A secret, a text message, a hidden conversation, a search in the middle of the night. People don't wake up monsters. They become them quietly, until the quiet explodes into something unforgivable. Today, Chris Watts wakes up every morning behind concrete walls. No children, no wife, no freedom, and the woman at the center of the mystery lives somewhere unknown, with no spotlight to expose her further, but no spotlight to clear her either. Just questions. Questions that may never be answered. And maybe that's what makes this story impossible to forget. Not the death, not the confession, but the feeling that the ending was written long before the final night ever came. Somewhere in a search engine, somewhere in a timeline, somewhere in a conversation no one ever heard, the future was already forming. This was not an accident. It was a slow collapse, and when it finally fell, crushed everything beneath it. And that is how this story ends. Not with justice, not with peace, but with a warning that sometimes the scariest part of a crime is not what you see. It is what you never notice until it is too late.